Hey heroes, Kolz here. Today I'm going to be walking you through the best pets in Heroes vs. Hordes. So I'm going to do this tier list based on kind of the following methodology, looking at which pets provide you the most damage as your main pet, what their passive abilities do and how those provide additional support to your main pet, and at the end and during, I'll probably also give you ideas on like how I set up my pets throughout the game. But this one is going to be mostly focused on hard mode and normal mode because that's what the majority of players do, but I'm going to give you a couple tips on nightmare mode also. I am relying on crowdsourced data in terms of damage and then also just my personal experience for the ones that I do have. But I have all of the base kind of like ones you can get through basic eggs and enchanted eggs. I just don't have any of the special edition like Blazetails of the world. So we're going to go through each pet one by one. I've already put out kind of like the base pets here. You can see the Elemental Striker, a Spring Bloom, and the Anaboos. And so those three I put in C tier, and then the pig and the mouse I don't really ever use for anything. They're kind of just basic, kind of fill out your collection pets. Okay, so Cloudhoof. Oof. Cloudhoof is an oof. This is the legendary pet actually for Christmas time. His name in the pet file is actually called Rudolph, which I think is fitting. But Cloudhoof, as we know him, unfortunately just doesn't do any damage. Like he's below some of the other kind of just rare pets in terms of damage. And so that's not great. You combine that with an expedition passive that's actually one of the stronger ones. It gives you a 0.75% chance of getting a neutral stone on expedition completion, which isn't bad, but it's very much like Emberpaw. And I've used Emberpaw for 6 months and I've gotten maybe 2 of those stones. So while it sounds great in theory, you just don't ever actually collect on that like 0.75% chance. And then as a passive, let's see. So I have this going over here so we can look at this too. His passive is Star Trail, adds an aurora-filled light trail to the main pet, enhancing its presence with the radiant shine glow. So I don't even think that does damage. I don't actually know, but it doesn't say anything about damage in there. So Cloudhoof is a very cool legendary pet to have, but he's not great for actually using in the game. So he's C tier, and he's basically C tier is all kind of tied. So like there's no ranking here. If like you're in C, you're in C. Don't worry about the rankings within it. All right, Emberpaw. I like Emberpaw a lot. Emberpaw is a very good, it will probably be one of your first rare pets, if not your first rare pet, and you can make him your main as soon as you get him. Unfortunately, he's melee, which means that he's going to have to walk around the screen in order to do damage, and that's going to slow and max out and cap his like potential damage. And you see that in the numbers, he comes in below Pyrokraken in terms of damage from rare pets. That being said, he's very strong. It's like perfectly fine to run him as you get him early in the game, and a very strong passive. So the passive adds a circle around a pet, kind of like fire orbs. So you have to make sure that your pet's actually in melee range, so it doesn't really scale well with Hydrobasilisk or like Pyrokraken because they're ranged, or Griffin. However, in something like Nightmare mode where they're stuck in the horde, it actually does a whole butt ton of damage. So you have to kind of pick your place, and it's a perfectly fine passive to run if you don't have anything else better. So like if you don't have any of the S or A tier passives we're going to talk about, totally fine to run Emberpaw as your passive. And in fact, he makes a lot of sense in some game modes, like I said, Nightmare mode and even Boss Brawl, where you can just get that passive constantly playing. All right, Dino. Dino is great. I got my lucky Dino like a couple months ago now. I just got him to over 300, so I unlocked his ultimate. Give him a look here. His passive is he shoots the whole map with damage. His ability is using kind of like a big earth ground pound that does damage to everybody. So great for a passive pet and tops the chart for main pets. So he's the second highest damage dealing main pet you can have. As the legendary that comes out of enchanted eggs, I highly suggest that you invest in enchanted eggs over time. And so what I mean by that is every event you're going to get currency tokens, and they usually give you enchanted eggs as one of the options in those currency tokens. Even this week, for example, with Warlord, it was an option. I would put any additional tokens you have towards those enchanted eggs until you get Dinosaur, and Crystalsaurus is his real name. Your expected value is you should get him after about 84, give or take, right? You're going to have good luck or bad luck. I got him after like 26, so I got super lucky. But I think of it as a multi-month grind towards that you invest in with enchanted eggs. And those enchanted eggs will get you epic pets along the way. And so I think they're just a general great, like if I have leftover currency, buy an egg or two, and over the course of 6 months, you'll eventually get Crystalsaurus. His ultimate's pretty cool. It rains down thunder from the sky and it stuns everybody on the map. So I would say that's not quite as strong an ultimate as someone like Hydrobasilisk, where you can actually end up slowing everything, but he's very close. And then Crystalsaurus's expedition bonus is it increases your chance of getting a basic egg, which is really a nothing burger. You get to the point where like you're going to have all the basic pets, and the extra 0.75% chance really doesn't matter all that much. So it's nice to have, but it's not make or break for the pet. All right, Pyrokraken. Pyrokraken is an S-. He's a fantastic pet. He's going to be your main pet until you get an epic. For that reason, I give him kind of like S- status. So he'll probably end up over here somewhere. And then you use him as your passive pet while you have a main pet, a main epic pet. So for the longest time, I ran Hydrobasilisk as a main with Pyrokraken and Emberpaw as my passives. And that is a super common setup. Like that will be your setup most of the time. I think he actually does more damage in testing than Griffin does. So like you actually want to run him if you can swing it over Griffin, which is kind of like not the best thing to hear in the world, but like that's just the reality of the case. So I would run something maybe like Pyrokraken with Emberpaw and Owl as your two passives. If you don't have Owl, you could run like a Striker. Those aren't great. That's the one trade-off there. You'd have to go and check and see if like maybe running Griffin with Pyro and Emberpaw nets you to more than having to run Pyro with a substandard passive pet. Something to check out and kind of check out for yourself. Pyrokraken by himself, great pet. So Earth Curl. This snail is A. I might move these guys around. I'll move them around at the end to look at them a bit. But yeah, snail is great. You know, he's a basic pet. The big thing is that he is the pet that you want to use in Nightmare mode. And in Nightmare mode, you use 2 of them. Each one of the snail's passive abilities grants your hero 15% health. And they stack, so it's 15 and 15. So you can get 30% from running 2 passive snails. And that is huge for Nightmare mode. Having both those passive snails adding to your HP pool, because you have so much armor and because you have things like Life Tome that just all multiply together and you get this like massive set of effective health. While it's a basic pet, it actually hits up into the A category, in my opinion. The bonus is a extra coin bonus, which is like, oh, Hydrobasilisk, this guy is a solid S tier pet. Hydrobasilisk, when you get him, will be your main pet for a very long time. So I got pets when they launched back in October. I just literally this weekend changed over to Dinosaur. So that was 5 months of Hydrobasilisk as my main. Its ultimate's fantastic. It makes all of your abilities slow. The Horde, so that's awesome for Nightmare mode. It's awesome for Faction Wars. It's awesome for every piece of content. Horde can't hit you. You can hit them and win. It's ranged, so it doesn't have to move around and do damage, which is fantastic. It produces these things called water domain expansions, which are just like geysers basically in the field of battle that will heal you if you stand in them and will do damage to Horde if the Horde stand in them. And he's got technically, I think, the best passive in the game for a pet at plus 20% critical hit for the other main pet. The issue with that, and this is like a game design thing for me, is that it's hidden. So when you have like the best stats, but they're hidden, they feel bad. So like Emberpaw is great. You see the circle. And you feel like, okay, I can tell when the Horde are in it and I'm doing extra damage. But with Hydrobasilisk, because it's a 20% crit chance to the main pet, you only ever see it in the damage screen. And so this will increase your damage from your main pet, but it doesn't feel as good as a player when you're playing. So it can be your main pet for forever. And then when you get something like Dino, it moves right into your passive and like you just keep on trucking. So Hydrobasilisk is S+, like just going to be like a great pet all the way around. Crystalsaurus is going to be a higher cap, but Hydrobasilisk is like fantastic. So let's go S tier, and then this S tier here, like this probably for now. And then this guy is like back here somewhere. All right, Owl. Owl's kind of sad. Owl is like, it's just not a great pet, unfortunately. You get it as part of like the Enchanted Egg series. So let's open up Owl. Cyclowl. The passive is it creates this random area of damage. It used to be bugged and would like fill up the whole screen into a ton. That was great, but they fixed it so it like little small areas. And in my experience, like you barely ever get Horde to like land in them. So it doesn't do a ton of damage in my opinion. And as a main pet, it actually underperforms things like Pyrokraken. Just overall, not a very strong pet. Nice to have in your collection, but not something that you're actively ever really going to want to run, with like the exception I was saying earlier, like maybe it could be your passive pet until you get like better passive pets kind of earlier in the game. Its additional extra riches is more pet orb currency, which is totally worthless. I have 16 million pet orbs. So 2% per run is not going to be helping me really at all that much. Cyclowl might actually be even like C tier. If I had a B tier here, it'd be a B. Just not a good pet. All right, Griffin also just like not good, unfortunately. I had Hydrobasilisk first, so I never really saw Griffin. I just recently got him, and he's still only at 2-star for me, so I don't have his ultimate unlocked. But he does not do a whole bunch of damage as a main pet, and his passive is pushback, which lets the main pet do pushback, which is I think apparently useful in things like Arena or in Nightmare mode where you're trying to push, like keep Horde away from yourself. but he just like constantly underperforms. And on damage, he's actually below Emberpaw. So for an epic pet, it's actually pretty sad. He does less damage as an epic pet than Emberpaw does as your main pet. Barely any damage. The one nice thing about this guy is in his duration decrease for his expedition bonus. So if you have like 5 Storm Griffins and you're getting 10% reduction, or 4 and you're getting like 8% reduction, that's more helpful. Overall, just a very, very poor pet. And so I would have kind of like this. Like there's a gap here. These guys are definitely A-, and then these guys are up here. This guy, I just learned the name of him today, and I don't remember it. Shellshock. He's fine. He's another special event pet that came out. He's a melee pet, and he charges around the battlefield, so he's able to get around and like hit some stuff. So he's definitely better than Emberpaw, but he's probably nothing like super right home about. His passive to other pets is it gives them little circles that spin around them, little turtle shells that spin around and help them do damage. So a good passive. His extra riches special expedition bonus is nothing to write home about it. It is fun to watch him spin, that for sure. Like he gets to spin in this shell and he goes all over the place. So it's fun to watch him, but I don't think it's like does all that. It's not really worth it. So overall, he's going to do more damage than Emberpaw. So if you have him and you don't have something like Pyrokraken, feel free to run him. And he's also a great passive if you don't have any of the other epic pets. Doesn't offer any kind of like other special abilities. So he only came out during, I think it was a Lunar New Year event, and he hasn't, like going to be able to get it otherwise. Very hard to get and a collector's item, but I don't think he's like one of the best pets in the game. But Blazetail is. So if you were lucky during the Lunar event and were able to grab Blazetail, Blazetail is probably the best pet in the game. So let's move this guy over here. These guys are like this kind of spread out. This is probably a pretty good visual representation. I mean, like, right, so Cloudhoof is probably better than these guys, so we'll move him up here. Cloudhoof actually does more damage than Griffin and Cyclowl, but like for being a legendary, it feels really bad to like have that little damage. Blazetail's awesome. Blazetail is the highest DPS pet you can get. Every single one of these abilities, it's just like how much DPS can you do, so you can use him as a passive until you get him leveled up as a main, and then his ability does a ton of damage. And then his ultimate is just like more damage on top of damage. So Blazetail, if you need max DPS for like boss brawl or like to clear out hard mode, normal mode, Blazetail is your best bet. Just does a ton of damage, but there's no utility in there. So there isn't anything like stuns or slows. So not as good for like nightmare mode generally, or maybe like arena where like you just need to slow at the beginning. Although maybe you can just blast through arena and not have it matter anyway. The expedition bonus is an 8% decrease, so that's 4 times as good as Griffins, but you're going to want to stack those with like 3 Griffins, and then you're looking at what, like 14%, and you're saving like 8 or 10 minutes. And like that's noticeable probably, especially on extended runs where maybe like you're saving like times 8 would be like, over an hour of savings. That's the kind of thing where maybe you stack Griffins and Blazetail on 8-hour runs, and you can convert those a lot faster. All right, so let's review my pet tier list here. We got Blazetail is very clearly S+. Crystalsaurus is an S. Kind of will eventually be, for the majority of players, their main pet eventually. So it took me 4 or 5 months to get him up to be my main pet. Hydrobasilisk was my main pet the whole other time. First epic that I've got, and I've been using him since. Pyrokraken is your great early game pet. He's going to be your main pet until you get an epic pet. And even then, you're going to move him over to passive. So like you use Pyrokraken all the time. I still do. Very, very good pet. So S-, and I guess it's S- not for his top cap because he's great early. So again, early game, Pyrokraken. Snail is A+ for nightmare mode, the nightmare mode pet. Like I double passive snails are fantastic for nightmare mode, so A+ there. Shellshock is a good high damage pet. Again, the only reason why I don't have him like down here with Pyrokraken is like, it's not really gonna get him. I guess if you want to argue, right, you can like move it over here somewhere. Sure. I think he's fair right here. He's the second best epic pet. I think he's fair right there. Above everyone but Pyrokraken. Yeah, I take that. He's fair here. Emberpaw is a great early game pet. Slap him on if that's like your first rare that you get. Could be your main until you get a different one. Will be your passive and for a long time. And again, you still use the passive in things like boss brawl. You can make sure that your pet is on the thing you want to attack all the time. So in like maybe if you're farming nightmare mode, if you're like super advanced, you can use Emberpaw as like more damage in nightmare mode. Griffin, unfortunately, is the worst of the epic pets. Doesn't do a whole ton of damage. The passives aren't great. It just kind of is what it is. It's an A-. I mean, it's better than these other guys, and it's like still fine to have and run. Like it's your first epic, and you can out level him. But at the same, even at level 400, he's doing less damage than Pyrokraken is on a typical run. So like, unfortunately, not very good. Cyclowl is the lowest main pet damage of any of these like rare, epic, and legendaries. and the passives aren't great anymore. Fine to run, like if let's say you only have Pyrokraken, Emberpaw, and Owl, that's what you're running. You're running Pyrokraken main, Emberpaw, and Owl as your passives. And then again, as you get Hydrobasilisk, you want to move him into your main and then run Pyrokraken and Emberpaw. And then if you get any of these guys, you're just sitting pretty. And then the fun one here is Cloudhoof. So I did move him up over here at the beginning of the problem is he doesn't do any damage as a legendary. So like you only could get him at Christmas time. And then he ends up only doing like, he does barely more damage than Griffin and Cyclowl. That feels really bad for like something that seems so cool. And he's got a cool passive that like illuminates the other pets, but doesn't do any damage. So like not the best. And while his expedition bonus sounds good, it happens so infrequently that it's really not even worth it. Let's make this a little bit prettier. Let me give these guys a little more spacing here. This guy's over here somewhere. Yeah, this is a general tier list for pets. And again, Crystalsaurus is a long-term investment. Start investing now in tokens. Once over tokens, and you'll get them eventually. All right, and I'm Kolz. I'm a high-level HVH player. If you like this tier list, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Every little bit helps. I set up a Patreon. You can feel free to sign up over there. You'll get access to videos about a week and a half to 2 weeks in advance. And remember, always do your adventures!